The architects unrolled the blueprints across the marble table. Golden lines traced endless corridors, majestic halls, gardens that resembled paintings. The Cardinal's palace would be a masterpiece. $15 million transformed into stone, crystal, and glory. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle watched in silence. His fingers touched the paper like someone caressing a wound. The project's dimensions grew before his eyes. 40 rooms, 3 libraries, a private chapel that would hold 200 people. Outside, rain beat against the episcopal office windows. Drops ran like tears down the transparent surface. The city stretched beyond the glass. Slums, zinc shacks, children running barefoot between mud puddles. Silence weighed heavy in the room. The architects awaited a word, a gesture of approval. The project had been approved by the Vatican. The funds were available. All it needed was a signature. Tagle closed his eyes. His hands joined in silent prayer. 15 million. The number echoed in his mind like a distant bell. On the other side of the window, a mother carried her child in her arms, running through the rain toward a shelter that didn't exist. Maria Esperanza held her 7-year-old son's hand. The rain had flooded their shack again. Everything they owned floated in dirty water. Clothes, photographs, dreams. The boy shivered with cold against her thin chest. They were just one of hundreds of families scattered across the city's outskirts. Cardboard houses resisting the wind. Canvas roofs that didn't protect from the cold. Children sleeping on wet floors, dreaming of real walls. Cardinal Tagle walked among these forgotten streets. There were no cameras, no official entourage. Just him, a black umbrella, and the weight of reality. His shoes sank into the mud. His vestments got wet. His soul broke with every step. An elderly woman sitting at her doorstep recognized him. Their eyes met for an instant. She said nothing, only bowed her head in respect. He returned the gesture. Between them, a silent understanding. Poverty needs no words. Tagle stopped before a house under construction. Half-built walls. No roof. A family of 5 had gathered there, trying to protect themselves from the rain with a piece of plastic. The wind carried their hopes away with the water drops. The cardinal watched for long minutes. Something was being born in his heart. The next morning, Tagle returned to the episcopal office. The architects awaited him anxiously. The palace plans were reorganized on the table. Every detail improved. Every luxury justified by tradition and the importance of the position. The cardinal sat in his simple chair. His hands touched the papers again. $15 million. 40 empty rooms. Gardens that only a few would admire. Luxury surrounded by misery. Opulence amid despair. He opened a drawer and took out a photograph. 100 families catalogued by the diocese's social services. 100 stories of suffering. 100 lives waiting for dignity. The image trembled in his hands like a visual prayer. The architects began explaining the construction details. Tagle interrupted them with a gentle gesture. His eyes never left the photograph. Children, elderly, single mothers, unemployed fathers, all needing something much simpler than a palace, a home. The decision had been born during the night, in his prayers. It wasn't a moment of dramatic illumination. It was a whisper in the heart, a certainty that grew like a seed in fertile soil. 15 million wouldn't build his palace. It would build 100 houses, 100 homes. 100 futures. The architects heard the proposal in stunned silence. 100 simple houses. 2 rooms each. Bathroom with running water. Small yards for children to play. No luxury. Only dignity. Only hope transformed into brick and cement. Maria Esperanza was the first to receive the news. A social worker knocked at the door of her flooded shack. The words seemed impossible. A house. A real one. With solid walls and a roof that would protect her son from the rain. She collapsed in silent tears. The project spread through the community like fire through dry grass. 100 families chosen from hundreds of needy ones. The criteria weren't political or religious. It was the size of suffering, the urgency of need, the weight of despair they carried on their shoulders. Tagle visited the construction site daily, not as a leader inspecting his project, as a servant observing a miracle under construction. His hands touched the bricks. His eyes followed each rising wall. Each house was a materialized prayer. The workers labored with uncommon dedication. They knew they weren't just building houses. They were building dreams, raising hopes. Each hammer strike echoed like a hymn of faith. Each brick placed was an act of love in motion. The news reached the newspapers like a silent bomb. A cardinal who refused a palace to build social housing. International media rushed to cover the story. Cameras invaded the construction site. Reporters sought bombastic statements. Tagle avoided the microphones. His words were few and simple. There was no heroism in his decision, only obedience. There was no sacrifice in refusing luxury, only Christian logic. The real heroes were the families who survived poverty with dignity intact. Maria Esperanza became the face of transformation. Her 7-year-old son watched the construction of their house with bright eyes. For the first time in his life, he imagined having his own room, a bed that wouldn't get wet when it rained, a place to call his own. Other dioceses began questioning their own projects. Episcopal palaces under construction were reviewed. Sumptuous budgets were questioned. Tagle's decision had planted a seed of necessary restlessness. An uncomfortable question: what purpose does luxury serve amid misery? Donations began arriving from around the world. Catholics touched by the story sent resources, not to build more houses, to build schools in the same community, health centers, community centers. Compassion multiplied like loaves and fishes. The first families moved in on a Sunday morning. Maria Esperanza carried her son in her arms through the front door. The boy touched the walls with his small hands. Real walls. Solid. As forever. Tagle was present at the key ceremony. Not in an official ceremony. Just present. Walking among the houses. Observing faces, discovering joy. Hands touching their own doorknobs for the first time in their lives. Children running in yards that belonged to them. An 80-year-old woman kissed his wrinkled hands when she received her keys. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her eyes spoke for her. Decades living in shacks. Decades dreaming of a real house. Decades praying for a miracle that came dressed in simplicity. The cardinal observed every detail. Simple curtains in the windows. Plant pots on the windowsills. Clothes hanging in the yards. Life happening in fullness. Dignity restored in brick and mortar. Hope growing like a garden in good soil. The 100 houses formed a small village. Clean streets. Central square with benches for the elderly to chat. Playground for children to play. It wasn't a palace. It was something much greater. A home for 100 families. A community born from love. 6 months later, something unexpected happened. The 100 families organized a celebration. Not an official event. A simple party. Each family contributed what they could. Homemade food. Handmade decorations. Music played on a neighbor's old guitar. Tagle was invited as guest of honor. He arrived without entourage. Without protocol. He sat on the ground with the children, ate the same food, laughed at the same jokes. For a few hours, he was just a man among other men, a heart among other hearts. Maria Esperanza approached him during the party. She brought her son by the hand. The boy had grown. His eyes shone with health. He was studying at a nearby school. He dreamed of becoming a doctor to help other children like him. Hope had grown deep roots. The most touching moment came without warning. The 100 families gathered in a circle. Each brought a lit candle. 100 small lights joined together in the center of the square. 100 stories illuminating the darkness. 100 lives transformed by the decision of a man who chose to serve instead of being served. Tagle watched the candles in silence. Tears rolled down his face without him trying to hide them. That light was worth more than all the palaces in the world. That community was more precious than any treasure. Those smiling faces were the church's true wealth. Today, 3 years later, the village has grown. New houses were built with donations that continue arriving. A primary school operates in the community center. A small health clinic serves the families. What began as 100 houses became a city of hope. Maria Esperanza now works as a community coordinator. Her son studies medicine at a nearby university, with a scholarship earned through his merits. He hasn't forgotten where he came from. On weekends, he returns to help at the community health clinic. Cardinal Tagle continues living in a simple residence. He donates most of his salary to social projects. He doesn't consider this sacrifice. He considers it privilege. Being an instrument of divine providence is the greatest honor a man can receive. The story spread around the world. Other religious leaders began rethinking their priorities. Palaces were exchanged for hospitals. Luxuries were converted into schools. The example planted in humble soil bore fruit in distant gardens. The true measure of a man is not in the palace he builds for himself. It's in the lives he transforms along the way. Tagle learned this not from theology books. He learned it in the bright eyes of a child who finally had a home, in the arms of a mother who no longer had to carry her son through the rain without destination, in the silent gratitude of a community that discovered the meaning of the word dignity. 100 houses, 100 families, 100 stories of redemption, one decision, one man, one faith that became flesh and dwelt among the poor. The true palace wasn't refused. It was built, brick by brick, life by life, hope by hope. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.